This was 1970, probably about April 1970, and he was more or less saying that he needed to build a new team. You know, he was talking about people that were just stars to me, and kind of saying, well, he's finished, and he's finished, and he's finished, and I'm going, you know, these are household names, these are great players you're talking to me about. And he was suggesting it would be a good time to come to...
You're gutless? That's what Bill Shankly might as well have said when Steve Heighway stood up in that dressing room and challenged the most powerful man in British football. It was the 1970s, and no player dared question the boss. Heighway did, and somehow, instead of ending his career, it defined it. This is the story of a university graduate who thought he was too clever for football, lost everything because of it, and then built an empire from the wreckage. Steve Heighway wasn't like other footballers. He didn't come from the terraces or the local youth team. He came from Warwick University with a degree in politics and economics. At 22 years old, he was signed from non-league Skelmersdale United in May 1970, walking into Anfield with qualifications that made him an outsider before he'd even kicked a ball. While his teammates had left school at 15 to chase their football dreams, Heighway had been studying economic theory and political systems. He even admitted that his talent wasn't good enough to skip university when he was younger at Manchester City. His degree was his safety net, a teaching career waiting if football didn't work out. That kind of detachment, that intellectual distance from the game, set him apart immediately. His teammates noticed. They nicknamed him Big Bamba, after the host of University Challenge, the quiz show for brainy students. It wasn't meant as a compliment. It was a reminder that he didn't belong, that he was different, that he saw football through an analytical lens rather than the raw passion that fueled everyone else. Bill Shankly had signed him as part of a major squad rebuild, alongside Ray Clements and John Toshak, but Heighway's intellectual reputation preceded him into the dressing room. Then came the confrontation. Shankly was famous for his rhetorical questions, designed to test loyalty and fire up his players. One day, he posed a scenario about a teammate needing help with a burning house, one of those emotional hypotheticals meant to prove you'd do anything for the team. But Heighway, still early in his Liverpool career, didn't play along. He stood up and he said it. Well, all I can say is, till you ask me a serious question, I can't answer. If you ask me silly questions, all you're going to get is silly answers. Teammate Tommy Smith recalled that it knocked Shanks back on his heels. In that era, challenging a manager's authority like that was career suicide. Managers ruled with absolute power. One wrong word and you'd be gone, sold off to a lower division club or frozen out of the team entirely. Heighway's response wasn't just analytical, it was arrogant. He'd essentially told the legendary Bill Shankly that his methods were silly, that his emotional approach to motivation didn't deserve a serious response. It should have ended him, but it didn't. Shankly, recognizing Heighway's technical ability and perhaps respecting the strategic mind behind that challenge, kept him. Heighway became the archetypal left-winger of the new Liverpool, making 473 appearances and winning major domestic and European trophies under both Shankly and Bob Paisley. The intellectual outsider had somehow survived his own arrogance, but that arrogance, that sense of being smarter than the system, would come back to haunt him. By 1980, things were changing. Bob Paisley was rebuilding the squad again, bringing in younger players to keep Liverpool at the top. Heighway, now in his 30s, found his opportunities shrinking. He'd been essential to Liverpool's golden era, making 444 league appearances and scoring 76 goals between 1970 and 1981. But in the 1980-81 season, he managed only 10 league appearances, 6 starts, and 4 as a substitute. The club was phasing him out. Younger players like Ronnie Whelan were taking his place, and Heighway was becoming peripheral, a veteran watching from the bench as Liverpool won the European Cup and the Football League Cup. Then came the ultimate insult. In the 1979-80 season, Liverpool won the First Division title. Heighway had contributed, making 9 league appearances throughout the campaign. But there was a rule. To receive a championship medal, you needed 10 appearances. Heighway had 9, 1 game short. One single game separated him from immediate recognition as a league champion. The rule was arbitrary, a bureaucratic line that ignored his overall contribution and loyalty to the squad. He missed out on his medal because of 1 appearance, a marginal shortfall that highlighted just how disposable he'd become. Liverpool eventually gave him a specially created medal years later, but the damage was done. The message was clear. His time was up. In 1981, Heighway left Liverpool. There was no statue, no chant, no goodbye, just 11 trophies and silence. After everything he'd given the club, he departed quietly, seeking new challenges abroad. The university graduate who challenged Shankly and survived was now being pushed out the door without ceremony. He went to America. Minnesota Kicks in the North American Soccer League offered him a fresh start, a chance to continue his career and earn some stability. He did well on the pitch, recording 26 appearances and 19 goals in 1981. But Heighway, the man with an economics degree, had walked straight into an economic disaster. The NASL was collapsing, while stable leagues like the NFL were spending around 40% of their budgets on player wages. NASL teams were spending over 70%. It was financial madness. By 1980, the league was running a collective deficit of around £30 million, nearly $75 million in today's money. Every single team was losing money. The entire system was built on reckless spending and poor revenue strategies, failing to secure national television advertising that could have saved them. The warning signs were everywhere. But Heighway, despite his education, didn't see them coming, or perhaps he did and ignored them, desperate for a payday after being cast aside by Liverpool. Either way, his intellectual arrogance had failed him again. This time, it wasn't just his pride on the line, it was his financial security. The irony was staggering. Here was a man who'd studied economics at one of Britain's top universities, who should have understood market instability and unsustainable business models. Yet he'd walked straight into a financial trap that any basic analysis would have revealed. The NASL's spending was outrageous. Their revenue streams were non-existent, and the competition from indoor soccer was bleeding them dry. But Heighway, perhaps blinded by his own need to prove himself after Liverpool, ignored every warning sign. It was the ultimate failure of his supposed intellectual superiority. The analytical mind that had challenged Shankly couldn't analyse its own situation. The economics graduate couldn't read the economics of his own league. This wasn't just bad luck. This was a fundamental failure of the very skills that had defined his identity, his degree, his education, his analytical approach. None of it mattered when faced with desperation and pride. Minnesota Kicks were right in the middle of it. The club was struggling with ownership changes and major financial roadblocks. And then, at the end of the 1981 season, it happened. The Kicks failed to pay their players and staff. Heighway, the economics graduate who should have seen this coming, was suddenly facing severe financial problems. The club he'd joined for stability couldn't even meet its basic obligations. Commissioner Phil Woosnam tried to find a buyer to save the franchise, but it was too late. In December 1981, Minnesota Kicks folded completely. The players were released in a dispersal draft, scattered across the dying league. Heighway's degree hadn't protected him. His analytical mind hadn't warned him. He'd trusted the system and lost. An economist had been caught out by an economic collapse, and now he was scrambling. He needed income immediately, so he pivoted to indoor football, joining Philadelphia Fever for the 1981-82 season. He played 23 games, scored 19 goals, and survived. But it was a humiliating necessity, a desperate move to keep money coming in after the outdoor league had failed him. The financial precarity he experienced was brutal and real, a harsh lesson in how quickly football could take everything away. For someone who'd always had options, who'd always had his degree as a backup plan, this must have been terrifying. The safety net had disappeared. Now, let's pause for a second. Football is a harsh business, isn't it? Heighway lost his place at Liverpool over one appearance. He lost his money in America because the league couldn't manage its finances. Drop a comment below. Do you think Heighway was right to challenge Shankly, or did his arrogance cost him a better ending at Anfield? And if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep going. After the financial disaster in America, Heighway returned to England. He'd developed some coaching skills during his time abroad, and in 1989, Kenny Dalglish recognised his potential. Dalglish appointed him as Liverpool's youth development officer, giving him control over the next generation of players. This was Heighway's second act, but it was built on his past failures, the intellectual arrogance that made him challenge Shankly, the financial distress that destroyed him in Minnesota. These experiences shaped everything he did next. Heighway came back with a mission. He was determined that young players would never suffer the financial mismanagement he'd personally witnessed. His economics degree, which had failed to protect him, would now protect them. It was almost narcissistic in its conception. The entire youth development philosophy became about preventing others from experiencing what he'd experienced, as if the academy existed to validate his own suffering, as if producing great players was secondary to proving that his pain had meaning. He wasn't just building a youth system, he was building a monument to his own failures. Every young player who understood financial responsibility was a vindication of his NICEL disaster. Every star who emerged humble and grounded was proof that his challenge to Shankly had been justified all along. He merged the rigorous working-class discipline that Shankly had preached with his own strategic, analytical approach. Heighway later said that the values he demanded were pure Shanks, but really, he was filtering Shankly's philosophy through his own intellectual ego. He wasn't just honouring the club, he was institutionalising his own vision, making sure that his analytical mind would shape Liverpool's future. This was control. This was power. This was Heighway ensuring that his way of thinking, the way that had gotten him into trouble with Shankly decades earlier, would now define the club's youth system. He pioneered the School of Excellence and led the establishment of the purpose-built Liverpool Academy at Kirkby in 1998 and 1999. Under his leadership, the academy became one of the most successful youth systems in Europe, producing Steve McManaman, Robbie Fowler, Jamie Carragher, Michael Owen, and Steven Gerrard. It was an incredible achievement, a legacy that far outweighed his playing career. But even here, Heighway's flaws showed through. In 2007, he retired from the academy. He cited difficulty and exhaustion, struggling with the turbulent administrative period under owners Tom Hicks and George Gillett Jr., when the club faced a crisis beyond the pitch. Heighway couldn't cope. He walked away. It seemed like another sign that he couldn't handle adversity when it wasn't on his terms. The man who'd survived the NASL collapse couldn't handle boardroom politics. However, in 2015, Academy Director Alex Inglethorpe asked him to return in a part-time capacity, mentoring coaches and players. He later took on a full-time consultancy role, working for 7 more years before finally retiring in December 2022. So here's the truth about Steve Heighway. His entire career, his entire legacy, was built on arrogance and failure. He challenged Shankly because he thought he was smarter than everyone else, and that intellectual arrogance set him apart. He lost his place at Liverpool, not because of bad luck, but because football is unsentimental and he was getting old. The game moved on without sentiment or ceremony. He lost his money in America because his economics degree meant nothing when faced with real-world financial collapse. All that education, all that supposed intelligence, couldn't save him from a league built on fantasy economics. He returned to Liverpool not out of pure love for the club, but because he needed to control something, to shield players from the risks that had blindsided him. It was personal redemption disguised as institutional service. But here's the twist. That arrogance, that failure, that desperate need for control, it created something extraordinary. Heighway's intellectual challenge to Shankly proved that analytical thinking could coexist with passion. His financial disaster in the NASL taught him the brutal realities that young players needed to understand. His unsentimental exit from the first team showed him how quickly football could discard you. Every negative experience, every moment of detachment and bad planning became a lesson he passed on to the next generation. The Liverpool Academy he built didn't succeed despite his flaws. It succeeded because of them. His arrogance gave him the confidence to institutionalize a philosophy. His financial failure gave him the knowledge to prepare players for economic instability. His quiet, unceremonious exit from playing taught him to value every player's contribution, no matter how marginal. Heighway took the worst parts of his career and turned them into the foundation of one of the best youth systems in world football. Steven Gerrard, Jamie Carragher, Michael Owen. These players grew up under a system designed by a man who'd questioned authority, lost his recognition, and been financially destroyed. They learned discipline from Shankly's values, strategy from Heighway's intellect, and resilience from his personal disasters. When Heighway finally retired for good in 2022, he left behind a legacy that was quiet but unparalleled. No statue, no chant, but a generation of Liverpool legends who embodied everything he'd learned from his own failures. Steve Heighway was an arrogant university graduate who thought he was too smart for football's emotional culture. He challenged the greatest manager of his era, lost his recognition over a single game, and watched his financial security collapse in America. But those experiences, those failures born from detachment and bad judgment, were the exact ingredients needed to build something lasting. His struggles created the Liverpool Academy. His arrogance created its philosophy. His financial shock created its ethical foundation. In the end, Heighway didn't just survive his own flaws, he turned them into a legacy that shaped Liverpool Football Club for decades. The intellectual outsider became the architect of a dynasty, proving that sometimes the most unlikely people with the most difficult journeys build the strongest foundations. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of football's most misunderstood figures, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Thanks for watching.